For an exciting, interesting afternoon of additional presentations and discussions. My name is Bonnie Bowen, and I'm one of the committee organizers, and with Mariko Chang, I was in charge of organizing this panel on career-life balance, models and mechanisms of institutional support. And the plan for the session is we're going to hear one keynote presentation and then have a panel of three short presentations, then with some discussion. So let me tell you who's going to speak. These names are in your program, so I'm not going to say them too many more times. Our first speaker, our keynote presentation, is by Beth Mitchneck from the University of Arizona. And Beth brings a special insight into career-life balance in this context because she spent a time at NSF as a program director for the advanced program. And before that, she was involved with the advanced IT award that the University of Arizona had. So Beth has quite a bit of experience thinking about career-life balance, ways to address this at the university level, and then ways at the national level we think about this also, because clearly career-life balance is important for faculty success. Our next three speakers our panel are going to be three people who have interesting programs currently ongoing on their campuses. Maureen Stanton from UC Davis is I probably got the name wrong. Vice Provost, no, that's not what you're called. Vice Provost for faculty. And she's an evolutionary biologist, which I am too, so it's always nice to have someone in your own discipline involved in these kinds of activities. And UC Davis has an IT award with a special component that has to do with dual careers. So she's going to tell us about what's going on there and the dual career activities at UC Davis. Barbara Walker from UC Santa Barbara is in the research office, and she's involved in a special UC Santa Barbara, did I say Santa Barbara? Project on team science that addresses work-life balance and family-friendly initiatives. So a kind of a new twist, an interesting aspect to what they're doing there. And Diedre Wheaton from Jackson State University is going to tell us about their Advanced IT Award and a special program going on related to a summer writing retreat at Jackson State that also has a family-friendly component. And she'll be talking about work-life balance for women of color in an HBCU. So we have a really interesting group. We're going to start with Beth's presentation, and then our three panelists will come up. They'll each speak for a little while. And then what I want you to do is think of questions as you go along. We'll have questions sort of like we have from the previous sessions, but we put a few index cards, or there are those sticky notes on your tables. Feel free to jot down your questions as you think of them, and then we'll have the whole panel up here at the end to address your questions. Okay, so I want to introduce Beth now, who will tell us about her perspectives from NSF.
Oh, thank you. And in true fashion, I'd like to thank all of you for being here and to thank the organizers, because this is a really wonderful gathering of people, and the talks so far have been fascinating. And I love looking out and seeing, most smiles, my former PIs and institutions, and it's really exciting to see Advance so well represented here. Bonnie and Mariko gave me what felt like a really huge task, and I'm supposed to do this in 30 minutes. They said, look out across the national scene and tell us what you see. So I'm going to try and talk really fast. I do come from the East Coast, although I'm at Arizona. And Bonnie and I put together a resource sheet, which is in your folder, which provides a lot more detail than I can provide. And so I'll gloss over some things because you are able to take a look at the resources. Okay, so work-life balance. This is empty right now, and it won't be empty very soon. But I thought one of the value addeds that I could give to you today is trying to provide a sort of perspective, a take on all that we know already is going on around the country related to work-life balance, or I'll say CLB, can't get away too far from my NSF background, CLB. So, I would say if I had more than 30 minutes, who in this room sees their lives and their work as work-life balance? But I'm not going to. Just think about this for a moment. And then think about that image like this, right? You know, I teach a huge freshman class, so if you're not performing in front of them, not that you're a freshman, but I'm used to it. So, you know, we think about life and work, and there's a tip balance, right? And then how many of us feel that our work is going this way and our life is going that way, and there is no balance, they're just going in opposite directions? And how many of you feel like this woman? That would be me just about all the time. And that's how I feel. But this is kind of the national discourse. We talk about career-life balance, and in reality, it's all of these things, right? And in reality, I'm going to cite to a dear colleague of mine at Jackson State who said to me when I was in the middle of a family crisis, Beth, there is no such thing as work-life balance. This is Loretta Moore, their PI. She said it's all about work-life integration. And so this image for me really portrays more what I think we're all living with on a daily basis. Sometimes the pieces fit together really well. Sometimes they don't. And sometimes there's pieces of our life and our work that's just kind of out there. And so if we come to a discussion of work-life balance, thinking about it is not something that's going to be in perfect harmony, but that our lives and our work will fit together in various ways at different times in different ways, then we might look at it a little bit differently. And so that's what I'm hoping to achieve today, to have us thinking about work-life integration, or CLB. I'll slip back into my DCEs every once in a while, a little bit differently. So also, like this morning, there's 4 things that I'd like to talk about. The first one is, what are the big issues in CLB? How do we think about this nationally? What is the NSF CLB program? And I'm just going to touch upon that briefly because you have a wonderful speaker tomorrow, Joan Fry, who I worked with at NSF, who's going to be talking about CLB. So she said, Beth, don't talk about it too much. And I said, I promise not. And then the third piece is, what's going on nationally around the country? What do we know is going on? And what are those new twists? Some of the new ways of thinking about work-life integration or work-life balance. And then finally, just to try to bring it all together to say this is what's going on nationally, and this is what we know is working or not working so much. So, are we ready? Let's go. So, what are we talking about at the national level when we talk about career-life balance? We're really talking about a way to create flexibility in our work lives. And it's a flexibility in particular for the academy that allows people to find some kind of, and I'll go back to the word balance, some kind of balance between competing interests in our lives, the work that we do, the family lives that are very dispersed, right? Those of us that have family lives, we know it extends in so many different ways. And the discourse at the national level really is about empowering people, individuals and families, and I'm talking about them separately for very particular reasons, but empowering both individuals and families to find a way to coexist, particularly in the academy where we know that the competing interests are really so significant, and we want to not feel dissatisfied all the time, both at work and at home. And the discourse is really about, or I'd like it to be about, finding equitable ways to fit all the pieces together of our lives, work, and the various life components as well. So the question always comes, why should universities invest in CLB? We haven't for a long time, and we've been fairly successful, right, as educational institutions without a major investment in CLB. Well, there's a lot of research out there, and all of these citations are in your packet, that show it's really, really important for both recruitment and retention for universities to make an investment in our faculty members' work lives. and in their home lives as well. So there's this huge discourse around family-friendly. And that's a really important thing, and I also want to argue that we don't only want to be family-friendly, we really want to be life-friendly, not just family-friendly. Because how many times have we all heard, that's not my issue, I don't have kids, or I'm single, I don't have a family. And I might beg to differ that you do have a family, but to think about it a little bit differently. But right now, it is about creating workplace cultures that are really family-friendly places. And there is also a growing literature that's debating what's most effective. And I'll talk about it a little bit, and again, you have resources. For faculty retention, is it actually having the policies themselves, or is it having a workplace culture that allows and empowers people to integrate their family and their work lives? And so this is an issue that's debated in the field. Okay, so what's the discourse? The image is it's competing. We're always tugging, that we have a conflict. We are bound in our work lives to be in conflict between our work and our family or our lives. And so this is really, I think, the tone of much of the discourse around the country. And I would like to suggest, I'm not sure if that's going to be suggested next one here, that that tone is related to this literature that's developed, in particular, that there's this gap between the formal policies that we have on campus and the use of those policies. So we have campus cultures, we have department cultures, and I promised myself I wouldn't be really personal, but I have 2 kids, one's 21 and one's 16, and we didn't have resources at my university. I'm looking at the U of A table over there. And after my first daughter was born, I went up for tenure. Some of the faculty members in my department said, so when are you going to make up those courses you didn't teach because you had a baby? I was like, yeah, oh geez, right. And it went downhill from there. So, there's still a lot of that, even though she's 21 now. We still find that people are reluctant to take advantage of many of the structures that are there to enable them to take kinds of leaves. So part of what we found, again, through the literature is that there's this balance and this tug of war between encouragement and discouragement for both men and women on campus to take advantage of these kinds of policies and structures. There's often a lack of communication, that people don't know about the policies that are there, whether or not they're being communicated, that's an issue too. There's often a fear that there's a consequence for taking advantage of these kinds of resources and leave policies that we talk about, and that impact on other colleagues for having taken advantage of leave policies or modified duties or restructuring. So it's very much a contested topic on campuses, yet one that receives an awful lot of attention. So, why is this often discussed as a woman's issue? We were just talking about this at the table before starting, and I look out around the room, and I hate to say, but it's mostly women here. And I won't say we're the men, but it is mostly women. And so why is this issue of engagement often constructed as a woman's issue, or work-life balance, work-life integration constructed as a women's issue? So in reality, the research does document that this is mostly a woman's issue, so that women are disproportionately affected by career-life balance issues, although some recent research is showing that men are very much affected as well, and particularly the new generations of men coming into the academy, they have different expectations, they have different desires, and they really do want to be involved. So I think we need to broaden this and realize that while it's predominantly considered a woman's issue, that it's also an everybody issue. Women do feel, and I'm saying feel, more work-life conflict than men do, and there's been some research on this, and again in the handout there's some good resources about that differential in feeling that conflict, but women certainly feel it. And this is a huge one, that more women scientists are married to other scientists than the reverse. So relatively few men are married to women scientists. So there's just that differential right there, which is very significant and part of the issue why dual career hiring programs is so important as well. And then there's a lot of research, and I just cite one of them that shows that that work piece, the life piece, does fall disproportionately on women. And I was joking beforehand, my two daughters look at my husband and say, Mom's doing all the work here. Well, that doesn't happen in all the families, right? So that's a really big issue. And, you know, this is a cartoon, it's a joke, but yeah, women are really engaged much more in general, this is a broad generalization, in the housework. The housework both at home and at the university. So while this is constructed as a woman's issue, it's not singularly a woman's issue, but the national discourse is very much a woman's issue. And we can talk about that in Q&A if you want. So what I'd like to suggest in a way of thinking about it is recasting the discourse that we have, that it is a woman's issue, I know, and there is that tug of war, I know, I feel it all the time, but if we recast from a conflict to something that's about support, then maybe we look at the situation a little bit differently, maybe the university structures can evolve a little bit differently if we recast the discourse. And recasting the discourse to work-life support can create a greater sense of inclusion. So we don't have people saying, that doesn't apply to me. So including elder care. And I know there's a lot of large publics, and I know that already at the large public base, we are including elder care in a lot of our family-friendly policies. But one of the things that I learned, and I was like hit over the head and hit between the knees by a 2x4 when I worked at NSF, is that the country is actually not dominated by large publics. Who knew, right? And that there are many, many universities, private and community colleges, regional comprehensive, that don't have the same kind of infrastructure that we do. It was a shock, but it is a reality. So finding ways to recast this so that we can really disseminate around the country some of the really effective practices that we have is really important. So that sense of inclusion, so somebody doesn't say, that's your issue. That's what I was told in my university when we didn't have any family leave policy. Beth, that's your issue. I'm not going to help you. So we can really enhance CLB by thinking about it in a much more comprehensive way. That yes, it's family friendly. We need to be family friendly in order to be able to move forward. But we do need to expand the conversation to a multitude of life events, not just the birth, adoption, or foster care placement. That there are many life events, some of which we've all experienced, that need to be factored into our conversation about career-life balance, and opening the door to these kinds of conversations that we have on campus about the importance of trying to find a way to manage our work demands and our life demands, but really talking about them openly without having any kind of penalty or saying that's just a woman's issue, because frankly it is everybody's issue. So recasting it is really important. So where are we on the national scene, right? I was asked to talk about the national scene. So I scratched my head and was like, where are we nationally? So nationally, we have tremendous calls for the incorporation of career-life balance into what we do at the universities. And we hear from the corporate world, we've done it, you guys can do it too. There are different issues, however. But on the national scene, that's where we are. As I mentioned, on the national scene, this is really discussed as a woman's issue, even though it's an everyone's issue. And as I mentioned, extremely uneven terrain. I am a geographer, so I have to get a little bit of that in there, but a very uneven terrain around the country and over time as well. And then sometimes there's even a backsliding. An institution has moved forward tremendously, and then all of a sudden things change and there's a backslide. So that's really important to think about too. And nationally, there is still a very important and very deep focus on the demands of the ideal worker in the academy. The ideal worker, and I've got a picture, and I told him I was using it as an ideal picture, but we'll talk about that. So who's the ideal worker? The ideal worker when the academy got going was not me, right? The ideal worker was a man, usually a white man, that had a whole infrastructure behind him to handle both the work at home and the work at the office. That ideal rarely exists right now. So how do we bring together the reality and then the ideal? But also on the national scene, there are subtle changes in sight, and those are the twists that we're going to be hearing about from the panel, but I'll be talking a little bit about. So this is my one slide on the National Science Foundation CLB initiative. I got to NSF, and among the first things I was told, you're now on a task force on career-life balance at the National Science Foundation. I said, oh, okay, let's get on and run with this train. So it was started, there's someone I think here from Carnegie Mellon, by Suresh, who was the director of the National Science Foundation, and he had been at an advanced institution or an institution that had done a lot of work around gender and said, we need to do this at NSF too. So there was this initiative started in 2012 to run 10 years to really try to move the needle, they would say, at universities in the US around career-life balance. And the fundamental motivating factor was to reduce the departure of women in STEM from universities. Because we know that often women leave universities and go back into industry because it's easier to deal with career-life balance, we're told, in industry. So this was developed as a woman's issue. During the time I was at NSF, though, it became constructed, that's we conduct social constructed, as more of a people issue rather than just as a woman's issue. But there were a number of what they call DCLs, Dear Colleague Letters, sent out to various awardees, to career awardees, GRFP, the Graduate Student Awards, and postdoctoral fellowships, enabling them to apply for 3 months of funding at $12,000 so they could get a technician or a lab manager to keep their research moving while they were dealing with the demands of family life. A little known fact is that this same deal was actually available to any PI at NSF, not just in those 3 areas. But, you know, information flow doesn't always happen the way that we would like it to. And then the advanced program, while I was there, had an initiative, and there was almost a $3.5 million investment in dual career support, and we'll be hearing about one of them, which is a huge investment from the National Science Foundation in dual career. So it's $3.2+ million given out to IT awardees to develop dual career capacity building awards, which is really interesting. We'll be talking about that in a minute. So here's some selected examples of CLB, and by and large, nationally, there's a lot of emphasis on compensating, in particular women, for the time that they spend on their lives. And that's the tenure clock extensions. This is the gold standard. The modified duties, so that you can keep being paid full time, but you're actually dividing up your work life. And then life cycle grants, which is not well known to people, but really, really important. And we'll talk about that in a moment. The second big area is creating space for partners. And I mean that broadly defined, not just faculty positions, but broadly defined space for partners in our work life. And then finally, the new twists that really are focusing on integrating our work and life rather than compensating, but finding ways that we can maybe achieve some kind of balance in the future. So in terms of compensating, that gold standard for the ideal worker. This is my dear colleague who hired me at the University of Arizona, and I told him, yes, I'm going to put you up as the ideal worker. He had a family, he had a wife, everything, you know, he thought he was very involved at home, but there was a lot of support to make sure that everything happened and happened well and right, both at home and at the office. So those ideal worker type activities are the tenure clock extensions, that gold standard of up to 2 years, the modified duties that I mentioned, and the NSF program, the CLB program, to enable your lab to keep going while you're working on your life. But it means that work keeps going on without you. And these are really about not changing our expectations of work and life. So I put up the image of, we can do it. How many times have you talked to people, I can do it all? It's exhausting to do it all, right? So enabling the ideal is both that ideal worker, and there are ways that we can enable the ideal and still manage our life events. So life cycle grants, which were really started very effectively with the early on advance awards, but was put on steroids, really, by Madison with their Life Cycle Awards, which isn't just transitional support, but this is a fantastic program that's now endowed at Madison, where they provide, now it's close to $1 million a year in awards to both women and male faculty members to get back on track after some kind of life event. And they are able to define life events very broadly. Maybe my machine blew up. Maybe my collaborator left the university and took the machine with him. Or maybe I had this crisis in my family. So it's really looking at this work-life integration piece in a very significant way. And this is a program I've been following, Bonnie, since we were just first-year PIs for Advanced, because of what they've been able to do and their effectiveness. And it's been so incredibly effective. So I brought 3 quotations from awardees. And they've done a lot of in-depth evaluation, both quantitative and qualitative, of this program. And as you read through these, what you'll find, and what's really interesting, is that the awardees see this as validation that they're worthwhile, that what they do is worthwhile. Validation that having a life event is not going to mean that they have to leave academia. And that life event could be an administrator, right? I was an administrator. I was out of the classroom full-time for almost 15 years. I came back in and was like, oh my God, this is a totally different life, right? But these kinds of quotations show that the recipients of these awards felt valued. That's a really good retention tool. They felt like the university actually cared about them, their lives, and their work. And this is a really, really successful program. Okay, making space for the partners. So we're going to have UC Davis talk about its career-life balance through dual career opportunity. And I'm just going to go through this really quickly. It's really constructed as, oh my God, I have that two-body problem. I have to accommodate. And all of these kinds of words and terms that are not always really complementary to the partners. The trailing spouse. I mean, I have a colleague who was hired 25 years ago as a trailing spouse. She's incredibly successful as a scientist, but still winces at that term trailing spouse. So we want to really be able to move this discourse from, oh my God, what a headache, to something that we can celebrate, having the benefits of dual career families. So thinking in terms of, wow, it's not awful, it's great. We get 2 for 1. We get 2 really great faculty members. We can improve the labor force at the university. We can have faculty members who are going to stay rather than leave. We're going to be able to place faculty members, partners into the community. We're going to increase that community, the town gown kind of thing. And it will improve institutional effectiveness. So there's a myth around dual career hiring, that the second person hired, we don't really want to take that person, but we got them anyway, and they're not as good. Well, the research actually shows, there's a great study from Washington State, and they were funded by Advance recently as well to do a whole national study, but the study of their own institution has found that actually the faculty hired from dual career hires are more productive and achieve promotion and tenure at faster and better rates than faculty that are not dual career. So this is, and they're more highly retained faculty members as well. So again, recasting this and using the evidence that we have takes dual career hiring from, oh my God, what a headache, because believe me, I did that, and a lot of times as my annual recruitment plan, 50% were partner hires and 50% were what we would call the primary hire, but they're just as good. So what are some of the reasons why? Faculty development, the focus of this workshop. And it really is about faculty development and institutional competitiveness and that issue of community relations, which I mentioned. Because sometimes you can find really fantastic hires that just happen to be in your town because their partner was hired by the university. So what are the basic models that we have for dual career hiring? This is the one that I think people most know about, a third, a third, a third. And the way that I think about this is that it's very much institutionally based. It comes out of the institution, and it's institutionally focused. because the hires are all at the institution. And there are a lot of variations on the theme. There's also a lot of issues around sustainability. I can't tell you how many, I think if I counted up the person hours, it was probably years that I spent negotiating with other deans about who's going to pick up the full cost of the hire at the end of the 3 years. And how do we actually make this work? And how do we make it a tenure track hire? Then we have the relocation service provision, which is all very important. And again, from the large publics, we're like, yeah, we all do this. But I promise you, this is not done all around the country. Then we have the ones that I think are really important, the capacity building and community-based projects. And two of them that I'd like to mention are not advanced institutions. It's UC San Diego and University of Chicago that have gone very quickly and very heavily into providing resources for their faculty. And Chicago, to a much greater degree, is working very intensively with the partners. And it's a great program to look at. Then we have the initial advanced one that was funded by the Advanced IT at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, which was about building capacity to link the university with the regional labor market in STEM. And we'll hear something about this. This is really a key one. And then the new twist. And the family advocate. And we have some really good models here in the advanced world. Montana State has a great family advocate program that is integrated with the recruitment process. And it's the same with UCI, with UC Irvine, fully integrated into the recruitment process of providing information to candidates as they come onto campus, providing that communication vehicle so no one can say, I didn't know about it. And then the family inclusion, one of the programs that I think is very interesting, this new twist, is at UT Pan American, which is UT RGV, Rio Grande Valley, about trying to build into their programming knowledge about the university to family members who are often from backgrounds where they don't get the university in the same way that other people do. And then mixing. So what's the best recipe? And we're going to hear a little bit about the best recipe to put it all together. You think a writing retreat is a way to put it all together? Well, yes, and that's a new twist, and we're going to hear about that too. So these are some of those twists and new models, and Jackson State University, they've got a new award, they've been doing this, they know how to do this, and how to integrate a lot of really important aspects of our work and our lives. And then one of the last is about team science retreats. Okay, raise your hand if you thought that a team science retreat could actually be about career-life balance. Who knew, right? But we're going to hear about how career-life balance and career-life issues can be fully integrated into the science that we do and our lives. So it's a direct recognition that work-life support is critical for every part of what we do. Okay, so what do we know about trends? We know that it's really been started, work-life balance, to level the playing field, right? To compensate for what we're not having time to do, and a real focus on family-friendly, which is important, no doubt about that, and finding ways for women to fulfill everything they have to do at home, everything they have to do at the office, and still feel satisfied, rather than fully exhausted. Okay, so really what we're trying to achieve is that irregular balance, that full integration of things that may not actually look like they fit together. So inclusion, that's what I'm seeing at the national scene. Not just a woman's issue, moving far beyond issues of motherhood and incorporating new institutions that have not already been including career-life balance. And then what I find really critically important around the country are initiatives that are building capacity and building community rather than the one-off. And yes, I am a product of the DC infrastructure, but it's really important in our programming to not just do one-off things, to be able to build capacity and build community and to innovate and to find those new models that are really going to move the needle. So thank you very much, and questions are at the very end.
Okay, thanks, Beth, for that great introduction, and I should see you all scribbling your questions here on your little cards if you have them, because we'll get to them at the end. And now I'm going to ask all three of our panelists to come up. You can just sit there, so it'll make it a little easier to get up here. And I think we're going to begin with Mo. You're first? So our first panelist to speak is Maureen Stanton from UC Davis. So she's going to explain a little bit more about what Beth started telling us about.
Yes, I've got it. Oh, yeah, I'll take the mic. Super. Okay, Beth, thanks for telling us about this. I'm going to set a little bit of a very quick context for you for the sort of regional and economic context for UC Davis, because it's important for you to understand what kind of environment we are trying to do dual career hiring within, facilitate. So we're the third largest of the UC campuses. We have around 3,000 faculty and other high-level academics, 1,500 ladder faculty, and very importantly, 6 professional schools and a major medical center is part of our portfolio. Regionally, we're in the Sacramento Valley. It's a very agricultural area, but we're also the state capital, so there's a tremendous amount of state government and education present. Healthcare is also a major industry. A little over 2 million people, and a fairly diversified economy. We don't have one major patron employer. So economically, Davis is the second largest employer in the region, and have about 30,000 faculty and staff, a lot of those at the Med Center, and we're generating about $7 billion, putting $7 billion a year into the economy. So it's a big place, but Davis is also one of the major players in the whole region. And we are growing. So through an initiative called the 2020 Initiative, we're on track to add 5,000 students between 2012 and 2020. And that means we have to also bring up our faculty numbers. And we are on track to hire about 650 faculty by 2020. So we are hiring like mad, and this is both an opportunity and a challenge, as you might imagine. So in the last 2 years, we've hired 145 academic senate faculty, and we have placed 38 for those folks. We've had 41, I believe, requests for partner placement and assistance. We've placed 38. 9% about of the people we've brought in for the first hire we have hired their spouse or partner. We do this, we don't have to be married. We have done this for same-sex couples. We recognize diversity in all dimensions. 9% have resulted in Senate faculty hires for the second hire, other academic positions, staff positions, management positions, etc. We also use this program for retention. So very important on the ground evidence that making opportunities for partners that are satisfactory, good jobs is a really important part of recruitment and retention. And I'll tell you a bit about our new effort which came out of the program Beth was discussing for regional assistance for dual career couples. So let's talk a little bit about the recruitment piece and how this works, kind of trying to show you the kind of the network of things that we now have in place at Davis. So you get the first candidate for a faculty position. That person is talking mostly the department chair, and the spouse or partner is kind of lurking in the background at this point. Then you get the offer and the spouse and offer, and at this point we are encouraging deans to support an initial consult for all faculty they're recruiting. A number of deans have signed on, and we've had maybe 30 initial consults so far just in the last 6-7 months. Then the partner may come out of the woodwork present a CV or a resume to the department chair. You guys all know basically how this works. And at this point, though, we now have a new capacity that we're developing, and this is a secondary kind of referral that can be used and has really the couple in mind for both regional, for placement or informational interviews for the partner, but also a series, tiers of pre-hire consults, really catering to the needs of the partner. Now, if that person is seeking, if the partner is seeking a UC Davis position, we have an in-house program that we've had going on for probably 12, 15 years now, which we call POP, the Partner Opportunity Program. It's located in my office in Academic Affairs. And POP has been very successful, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. But what if, in fact, the partner cannot be placed at Davis? For example, we may have a partner who is a high school teacher and wants to remain in that area, or is in other areas, health industries that we don't need. Then in that case, we have not been able to do much for them through the POP program. But now our Capital Resource Network, our regional network, is now starting to address these issues and has developed a one-year transition and support program for couples. So let me give you some of the nuts and bolts of these programs. And I am going to do a little nuts and bolts. I'm going to tell you how much these things cost to do, just so you can see what it looks like for a program of our size. So one of the key things is, for the amount of hiring we're doing right now, it takes a full-time POP coordinator for that program. And Wendy Kircher has done a just fantastic job taking over this program within the last year. She works very closely. Beth said that she spent all her time trying to negotiate with deans. Wendy facilitates this, and very, very important part of the project. She has to know the campus really well. It's very important. She is making networks and connections all the time, and it really, it's making a great difference. This really isn't too necessary, but just to say that when we get a POP-eligible recruitment, what we call the first hire, that candidate's partner needs need to be identified. The dean informs us of this need, and we sort of walk the dean and the department through the process. Now, there are two basic kinds of processes. This process is what happens if the partner is seeking and ultimately lands a faculty position. This process is a little easier if we are sending that partner or trying to identify a UC Davis non-faculty opportunity. What's a very important part of the faculty process is that the receiving, what we call the receiving department, obviously has to strongly support the hire of the partner. In our system, the partner is not free. That's very important. It's not a free FTE, all right? I'll return to that in a minute. The faculty have to vote that they even want to get a waiver of search. They're not saying we want to hire this person. They say we want to look carefully at this person without a search. Then that search waiver has to go through 2 Senate committees for review and then gets approved by me. And at that point, they can actually interview, make an offer. In fact, they can be having kind of informational visits before then, but this all has to happen pretty quickly. Then we have a formal appointment process. So it can take a while, and we do sometimes lose people because we're not hiring their partners fast enough. Simpler process for the staff, the non-faculty positions. So we are on the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 model that Beth mentioned. So how does it work? If the second hire is a faculty partner placement, we provide 3 years of salary and benefits to that person before the receiving department and dean pick up the tab. All right? So, and how does it split? Whoops. The originating dean and department take 1/3, the destination partner, dean department take a third, and the provost kicks in a third. For other partner placements, it's 2 years of support, same deal. And these kind of one-third, one-third, one-third arrangements are quite flexible. In many cases, the destination is a laboratory. If it's a staff or research type position, had all kinds of interesting examples of creative ways to place partners. If it's a faculty position, there is some job security there. For these other placements, typically these are temporary placements. But what we find is that these folks are good in many cases, and most of them end up finding career positions. So money-wise, to place the number of people I talked about, 38 people over the last 5 years or so, the deans, departments, et cetera, have kicked in close to $3 million. Now, a lot of this is salary, of course, for in some cases, for people who, positions that would have been hired anyway. And the provost has had to put aside about $2 million to support the program. So it is expensive, but that's also not very many startups, I'd have to say, in the STEM disciplines. Just puts it into perspective. So what makes the program work? Several things. And so Beth was a geographer. Well, I'm a biologist. And I have to say, there's this thing in biology called positive assortative mating. And in this context, what it means is that really smart, motivated people tend to be attracted to other really smart, motivated people. And as a result, high-quality academics often have very talented partners. And so this can create some real motivation for the receiving units or individuals. We have had some very, very conservative senior faculty won over to the POP program because they had someone spectacular drop into their laps as a second hire. And that, we can win them over one by one that way. There's a high likelihood then of permanent funding for that person because they're very talented. And what's helping us right now is, frankly, the privates, the large elite privates, have been a little slow to be proactive in partner hiring. And I constantly tell my faculty, this is our biggest weapon against Harvard, Princeton, Yale, et cetera. We're using it. You have to have the central campus commitment. We don't hold faculty lines centrally. It's a 3-year shared commitment, and so the receiving department has to be on board, and that means that can produce some limitations. What's helping us right now is that we are a big campus and we're growing. So if a department elects to request a search waiver, chances are they're still going to be able to hire in the next few years through recruitment. Developing a culture of reciprocity is absolutely critical, and this, I think, is one of the toughest things. We still have units out there that think our POP program doesn't work, and I just tear my hair out and say, how can you say that? Look at these fantastic hires we've made, both second and first hires, and they're in situations where, well, we tried to get somebody and no one would hire the partner, or we refused to hire the partner of another department. That kind of naysaying culture is one of the challenges to overcome. What we're doing now is we're getting more data out there so the campus can see how successful it is. It has some limitations. We only have so many positions available on our campus, and it may be that the skill level or expertise of the partner just doesn't match what we need. And then that brings the regional context into play. And I want to talk just a little bit about the Capital Resource Network, what it is, how it got started. So this was an offshoot of our advanced program, as Beth discussed. This is part of the Career Life Balance program. We applied for and received a relatively modest supplement. And what that supplement did is it funded us to consult with Angie McNerney. Is Angie here today? She's fantastic. If you have not connected with Angela McNerney, you should. She's the founder and CEO of Tech Valley Connect, I guess the first such program that was launched by Advance. We also, as it turned out, had a fantastic pop hire fall into our laps as a potential director of the new program, and the provost agreed to fund her salary through the POP program. So in year one, we were consulting, beginning to develop a picture of what it might look like. At the beginning of year two, we had the business model development website, building an advisory council, which consists of 7 of the major regional employers, and some additional staffing support. Our Office of Campus Community Relations realized this was such a huge networking opportunity for the business community that they have basically contributed half-time of a very great staff person to this effort. So we have 1.5 full-time people. We just went up to 2.5 as of this month. Consultation with the deans. The deans signed MOUs saying, I understand the cost structure, I understand what it's about, I will start referring people to the program. And we launched in March 2015. I think they've had 30 clients so far. So for a small group that's just starting, it's really impressive. And starting late in 2016, we intend to extend this to the rest of the network partners. Linda Sadian, our amazing pop hire for this position, has been fantastic. Just to give you a sense of nuts and bolts again. The initial consultation, that for anyone who's being offered a job, they can ask the questions. This is the coolest thing, I think, about these programs. We as the employers, we cannot ask all those important questions. Do you have children? Do you have elders who you are caring for? Do you have any special needs? Do you have a horse? You know, what have you got? They can ask all those questions. They do it confidentially, and we have a special agreement. It means even now, while they're still part of UC Davis, confidentiality. They do not share any of the information they get through the network with us. Then the pre-hire consults, this is several tiers, and the final tier, when the candidate comes in, the first candidate comes in for, say, that second visit, Capital Resource Network is spending most of a day with the partner, helping them tour the campus, meet important people, connect with good real estate agents, learn about schools, etc. It's tremendous. And then the full or continuing referral is a whole kind of support transition system. It's really quite astonishing. It's just beginning. It's not independent yet. We certainly hope that it will become a 530-something C, whatever that is. I can't rattle that off yet. But the price is pretty reasonable, and our deans are starting really to get on board. It has also helped us with 2 key retentions recently. So it is a big program. Supporting dual career hiring does take money, resources, time, and a regional perspective. Thank you very much. I'll take questions after.
Okay, if you'll write your questions down, we'll address them in a few minutes. If you do want to look at any of these presentations afterward, they will be in the box that you received a link to, so you can go back and look at those references if you want anything like that. Or just send a note to Megan and she'll send them to you. Okay, our final speaker for this session is Diedre Wheaton from Jackson State University, who's going to tell us about the very innovative and interesting program they have related to career-life balance or integration or whatever.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am going to be sharing a little bit today about some things that have been happening at Jackson State for the past couple of years. I would be remiss, however, if I did not say on behalf of our JSU Advanced PI, Loretta Moore, hello to everyone. She wishes that she could have been here, but I think she trusts me by now to represent Jackson State well. So I want to start just by telling you a little bit about who I am and how I got connected with Advanced, because in many ways, although I am not in a STEM discipline, a lot of my career advancement at Jackson State is very much so because of things that happen at our institution as a result of advance. So my actual graduate training was in an American Studies program, so an interdisciplinary studies program with a focus on understanding race and identity and how that impacts people's way of actually just kind of living in their world, whether that's in the educational setting or through the process of teaching and learning. And when I completed my graduate studies and took a job at Jackson State, I actually was in a non-tenure track faculty position. So I stayed there and worked for a couple of years, and it wasn't until around the third year of the implementation of JSU Advance at Jackson State that the position that I was in, not a STEM discipline, not an SBS discipline, but my position was transferred from non-tenure track into a tenure track position because of some of the influence at the institution. My involvement actually in Advance was actually also rooted in my participation in a faculty development program that Advance helped to implement. So in a lot of ways, the mentorship and transitions in my career are because of the impact that Advance has had on our campus. So I want to tell you just a little bit about kind of how we transformed, I guess rather took our summer writing retreat, which is one of several components of our overall JSU project, and how we were able to integrate some work-life or career-life balance initiatives into that. So just in brief, I've included here some details of what the goals of our project were, and so just talk a little bit about these four. We really were interested in understanding basically the things that would impact a faculty member's ability to advance, right? What helps you move from assistant to associate, from associate to full, from full professor into an administrative position if that's what you desire. One of the things that we learned very quickly through getting a better understanding of the landscape of the faculty who were at Jackson State in particular was that we had quite a few people who were in STEM fields who were in non-tenured positions. We also had quite a few people who, although they may have been had advanced to the associate professor level, kind of got there and got stalled, right? Never actually kind of went on to pursue full professorship. So we wanted to get a better understanding about what was the holdup in those, especially for those who were stalled at the associate professor level. In terms of the second and the third goal, kind of trying to provide career mentors and fostering a climate and culture of inclusion, what you may find interesting is that although Jackson State is a historically black institution, you would not think that inclusion or feelings of community would be a problem there because technically you're not in a racial minority. But in many of those STEM disciplines, you still might be the only African American or the only woman in your department, which can be a bit isolating. So when you take that into consideration, you have another issue to deal with. In terms of goal 4, in terms of thinking about policies and procedures and practices, run into another issue that I think may be a little bit unique to some HBCUs, which is this. Jackson State has a very long tradition and history of being involved and active in civil rights activism and the fight for racial justice that can sometimes silence or overshadow efforts that are made to address gender equity. So we kind of had to deal with some of those things, and that helped to inform the way that the goals for the project were set up. So given some of that context, our project started out with very ambitious components. The idea was kind of to try to attack those different things from as many different directions as possible, and then get an idea about which things are kind of most important or most effective. The summer writing retreat really was designed to be the place where we look at, how do we help assist faculty members who have relatively high teaching loads and service loads and all these other things. How do we help ensure that they are publishing
And submitting grant proposals, how can we do that? Mentoring primarily was about, okay, how do we get you connected to someone whose career is moving in the direction that you want yours to move in? If you can't get mentorship within your own department or college, how can we provide assistance in helping you to do that? Visibility and leadership, really all about increasing your ability to not just be known on your campus or in your institution, but in your discipline on a national and an international level. And all the other components, bias
awareness and policy, and of course evaluation, were all linked to understanding our campus climate, giving us a better sense about what things beyond just the technical components of articles and publications and research and labs, what is it about the departmental culture, the college culture, the campus culture as a whole that might inhibit or perhaps contribute to someone's career advancement. So what we found after the first couple of years of implementation was that one of the components of the project that proved to be very successful was our summer writing retreat. So I've included some of the objectives and the expected outcomes here. What you'll notice about this list is that you don't see work-life or career-life balance on the list as an objective or an expected outcome. Part of what we learned after the first couple of years of implementing the retreat, however, was that even though we were not necessarily thinking about career-life balance on the front end, it became very apparent after we got people at these remote retreat locations and started talking to them about the things that they needed, right? What did they perceive? What was happening in their departments? What kind of support did they need? That was one of the major things that came out. One of the examples that I can think of from a focus group that we did actually before the first retreat, in one of the focus groups, a participant asked the question or asked the interviewer, can you tell me how to explain to my family what I do every day, right? Most people, if they're like my parents, have not gone through a PhD program. They don't know what your life is like. My mother thinks that if I tell her what my class schedule is, then if she calls me at any other time of the day, I should be available, right? Or if it's spring break, then I should be free to come home or go on a trip or whatever. So that need, right, to be able to help them to, just on a very basic level, explain to family members, to friends, to the people at your church, what the life of a scientist involves, what your day looks like, what your semester looks like, was something that they expressed needing. And so we were able to tweak and adjust what happens at the retreat to help fit that, right, to help address that need. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about one of the things that I think is perhaps most important when, I guess, understanding why we thought that the retreat was necessary and some of the ways in which the structure of the retreat has sort of transformed over the years. A lot of the description that you see here, the summer writing retreat participant archetype, this actually grew out of our participation in an NSF I-Corps for Learning program. And we were thinking about, okay, well, what in the world, how would this summer writing retreat need to be better? How can we focus on the participants and who's actually coming to these retreats to understand how we need to shape what we offer during this time that we have them. So a lot of the information here is probably pretty familiar to you. At our institution, it is not uncommon for people to have a 3-4 course load per semester. At many HBCUs, if there is not, of course, a PhD program in your area, you might not have access to graduate students to work in your lab. So quite often, these faculty members who are teaching these course loads are working with undergrads in their labs, which presents a different type of challenge in terms of the time that goes into getting them ready to do the type of work that you need them to do. Of course, doing advising and serving on committees. My situation is very similar to this fourth bullet, which is that depending upon the size of your department, new faculty may be asked very early on in their career to take on administrative duties. So I'm going to
second year in my tenure track position as an assistant professor, but I'm also coordinating a program, which adds another level of complexity to the things that you have to do in the course of a day. An interesting thing, as we were talking to faculty members at HBCUs, Jackson State and others, is that we kind of have started to realize that people at HBCUs who are teaching at HBCUs sometimes find themselves in situations where their institutions see themselves as institutions in transition. So although they may have been historically more teaching focused, they're now kind of moving and kind of increasing the requirements and expectations in terms of publishing and getting grants and things like that, which again adds another layer of complexity to the nature of the work that you're expected to do. In terms of these personal traits of the participants at the retreats, we did find that that some people had challenges balancing all of these new expectations. Something that was somewhat unexpected as we talked and received feedback, though, was that a lot of faculty members, especially those who maybe had completed graduate work at very high research productivity institutions, when they came to an HBCU, they wanted to keep up that same level of productivity. So they had high expectations for themselves, quite often much higher than what would have been the sort of minimum requirements for tenure and promotion. So they wanted to be active and engaged and recognized in their field. So there was a need here to provide them with resources and support to be able to do that. And the last two that I'll talk about the last bullet here, is that I think it was kind of interesting as we talked about community engagement. Quite often, faculty, and I think women especially, in STEM disciplines, find themselves in a situation where, whether it's through a community involvement or sorority involvement or church involvement, if there is a need for any sort of math education program, the expectation is that you will be the person who helps to coordinate and facilitate and make this program or after-school project happen. So that, again, kind of plays a significant role in, as we thought about what we needed to do at this retreat in order to make it most impactful and helpful. So in terms of our general approach, right, what is our summer writing retreat formula, if you will? We really try, when we are soliciting participants, when we invite applications, to select participants who are at critical junctures in their careers. Either someone who has recently been hired, who's really ready to kind of hit the ground running and get started, someone who is approaching a third-year review, maybe the year or so prior to the submission or preparation of their tenure portfolio. We have some people 1 year post-promotion so that they can kind of get started thinking about, okay, what's next for me? So we really look for applicants who are at those critical junctures. Another part of what makes a retreat successful, I think, is the availability and the identification of really effective accountability coaches who come, and really we usually have a group of about 2 or 3 coaches at each retreat who come. They serve to provide one-on-one coaching. They do presentations about what reviewers look for and things that they did to kind of move to the next level. They share information about how they've been able to maintain a productive career and scholarly engagement. We implement the summer writing retreat curriculum with the understanding that it's probably going to change from summer to summer based on who has been admitted and kind of what the needs of those who are attending the retreat that year happen to be. But I think the last 2 parts of what we have found effective are probably most important. Arranging a system of post-retreat interactions. So when you have people isolated in the woods of Mississippi for 5 days, it's pretty easy to keep them focused, right? You have a block of time every day that's devoted to doing nothing but writing or sharing what you have written that day with someone else. But when you go back home for those other 6 weeks of the summer, how do you keep that momentum going? So we have set up a system
of accountability through the week so that people have a designated coach who kind of talks to them throughout the course of the summer. They submit work each week, and the idea is that by the end of the summer, people can come back for a final week of kind of wrap up and review of their article or proposal, or if they're not able to come back for the final week, then they can continue their engagement through an online focus. During I think it was after the third year of our implementation, we did start something that has continued on campus, which is an academic year follow-up. So although the summer writing retreat ends, when summer is over, we started doing monthly Saturday writing retreats. So these are like half-day events. So Saturday mornings from 9 to noon or whatever time works for us, we set up at a coffee shop. Sometimes we do it at the local gallery on campus, someplace that's nice and inviting and quiet to come and work. And we invite people to come and work on a project. They can share ideas, have someone there to kind of peer review a piece, or just use that block of time to work on something. And we found that to be very useful in terms of keeping people engaged. So how does this, right, all connect to career-life balance, right? You would think that a retreat where you're removed from family, removed from campus, removed from all these other responsibilities would not promote career-life balance, right? Because we're basically removing all of these things that you should be trying to balance. What we found is that it actually had some unexpected benefits. Let me go back for a second. One of which is that during the time at the retreat, what the women were able to do was create networks, right? They were able to spend a week living in these cabins, talking, having meals together every day. So someone who primarily only talked to other biologists now knows people in the mathematics department or in engineering. So they create friendships and networks with people who are outside of their immediate discipline. That becomes really important to their ability to see that there are other people who are in the same boat that they're in, right? Who can give them suggestions and feedback and ideas on how they have handled situations in their departments at different junctures. Another way that it's important is that we have integrated into the retreat actually a time where each participant shares something that they do during the course of an academic year to help them get through the semester, right? We all know what the high-stress moments are. Registration, the first 2 weeks of the semester, approaching midterms, early registration period and advising is pretty high stress, end of the semester. And what we do is we have people writing on flip chart and posting around the room different strategies that they use to help them balance their lives during those periods of the semester. Something else that I think that was an important component of the summer writing retreat that lends itself to balance and productivity is that we basically kind of try to focus on the fact that being productive as a scholar is really not going to happen if you're not able to find some sort of balance, right? And the approach that we take to scholarly productivity is doing a little bit every day, writing a little bit every day, and it kind of leads to gradual progress. And we really kind of feel that having the ability to make that time on a little bit of time on a daily basis can work in other areas as well. So kind of finding small ways to seek out family support to do the things that you need to do. In terms of giving you, a better picture of what that looks like in a more practical way, I'm going to kind of share in my last couple of minutes some strategies, if you will, for institutions, colleges and departments, and for individual faculty that we see as having grown out of our retreat. So on an institutional level, one way to promote work-life balance and scholarly productivity is to recognize and invest in excellence. So when you have people on your campus who are doing great things, invest in those folks and recognize the work that they're doing. Support faculty development efforts and initiatives. adopting family-friendly and bias-free policies. And the last one, developing a systematic process for documenting, measuring, and acknowledging success. Acknowledging success or the need for improvement in recruiting, retaining, and promoting STEM women through the professorial and leadership ranks. This has taken the form, or kind of been implemented on campus through the hiring of an EEO and a Chief Diversity Officer, that position was created at Jackson State as an outcome of our advanced grant. And we really kind of recognize that even after the summer writing retreat is no more, he will still be there to help implement some of the things that we have started. In terms of at the college level, deans help to set the tone for chairs in terms of shaping how chairs are supposed to contribute to the goals and missions of diversity and collegiality within those departments. And department chairs also have to play a very active role in the career advancement and proactively addressing any sort of gender bias that presents itself in their department. And the last one, getting senior faculty really involved in modeling healthy and balanced behaviors for new faculty in the departments is also very useful. And then on an individual level, establishing those networks of support on campus, at home, and within your social circles, applying the psychology of success, habit of writing daily, to avoid that binge writing or binge resting. Sometimes it happens as well. Really finding a way to educate your family and about your faculty responsibilities and teaching them how to support you. Developing that research and scholarly agenda, and establishing some multi-institutional networks of support to promote the balance and productivity. And then the last slide, some of the ways in which the writing retreat has had a broader impact on our campus is through the implementation of the Academy for Research and Scholarly Engagement. So the coaching and mentoring that happened in the writing retreat is now institutionalized through our Center for University Scholars through this Academy for Research and Scholarly Engagement. That program invites faculty members, men and women from any departments on campus, to participate in a academic year-long grant writing workshop. So they meet monthly to learn about grant development, but each person is assigned a mentor who basically coaches them through the process of developing a grant proposal. So you have mentorship in place. You have someone who is kind of walking with you through the process of an academic year to make sure that you have a grant proposal that's ready by the end. A faculty engagement program works in a similar way. I've talked a little bit about the Saturday writing retreats already. The last two, the summer grant writing retreats for academic colleges, it didn't take very long for men on campus to say that they wanted to come to the retreat as well. Right? But it wasn't really for them. But we were able to work with some of the academic deans to get them to host summer grant writing retreats specifically for their college. So now you have men and women attending retreats together and working in teams to develop grants for the college. And we offered 3 of those. This summer was our first summer doing those. So we had 3 colleges who participated in that program, and I think it was very effective. The 2 ways in which we have kind of tried to even extend the impact of the summer writing retreat even further is through other grants that we have gotten funded. So I talked a bit already about our I-Corps program. We explored avenues for commercializing the summer writing retreat. And in that process, we interviewed over 100 faculty from HBCUs and PWIs and talked to them about what their needs are in terms of work-life balance and scholarly productivity. And a lot of the changes and transformations in the writing retreat have been the result of the things and lessons learned from those interviews. And the last one, our Partnerships for Learning and Adaptation Network, also sponsored through the National Science Foundation, is an opportunity that we're going to have starting this coming summer to share the summer writing retreat with 5 other minority-serving institutions. So they will have some flexibility to take the core structure of the writing retreat and adapt it to their specific institutional needs, offer a retreat on their campus, and provide some feedback on, okay, what was helpful, what was useful, which types of faculty members was this retreat most useful for. And our hope is that as we gain that sort of, gain additional information about how the project maybe needs to be different depending upon the institution type, we'll have a much better sense about how a project or a program like the Writing Retreat could further lend itself to helping faculty to balance the demands of their lives and their careers more effectively. And this is, I'll just kind of end with one of my favorite images from the Summer Writing Retreat. If you've never been to Mississippi before, we welcome you to join us in a writing retreat. It's lovely, and you get a lot of work done.
Thank you for that inspiring talk, and the concept that you can design some kind of program and then market it out there and share it with other institutions. So obviously a lot of that has happened with respect to broader impacts that we've heard about, but it's happening with some of these career-life balance issues too. Okay, we do have a few minutes. We're going to take a few minutes for questions. Is this the microphone? Anybody have any questions that you've jotted down that you'd like to ask about career life integration?
I'll just read it.
Okay.
Millennials are demanding work environments that support work-life integration. They expect it. What is higher ed doing about flexible work hours, in other words, working whenever, not just the regular time campus is open, teleworking, and manageable workloads and manageable expectations? So once we get them here, how do we keep each other healthy in those ways?
And Beth, where's Beth? You want to come up and join the team?
I'll just quickly say that Beth, come on up while you're coming up. I think the time flexibility is one of the advantages of academia, and one of the things we as senior faculty don't do enough of for our students, grad students, and junior colleagues is stressing that there are some great things about academia for dealing with family responsibilities. The time flexibility is a key one. Expectation management is another issue. Love to hear what Beth was going to say about that.
Ooh, I'm not sure I can talk about expectation management. I've been working on that one for a while. But some of the things that are happening on campus that have both direct and indirect impacts on the flexible arrangement for millennials are teleworking through the internet-based delivery. So as we have alternative delivery systems, we also allow our faculty, and this is something that's happening around the country, to work in more flexible ways. So I know of lots of faculty who teach at one institution, but for family reasons in particular are living somewhere else. I won't talk about my cross-country commute for NSF because that wasn't really CLB oriented. But a lot of faculty members are doing that by doing the distance learning, and the branch campuses as well. I think another activity that we're doing that fulfills both the institution's need to have their classrooms and their space used 24/7 is by having what we call at the high school level the 0 hour, so really different time periods that are used for instruction, as well as the evenings and alternative delivery spaces. Back to the geography. So delivering, one thing that we've done in Arizona, I'm looking at the Arizona-dominated table, is that we're delivering the educational services in the locations around the state where the population is located. So that's career-life balance for the faculty members, but it's also trying to address an accessibility issue for many people desiring higher ed that can't commute to the locations that have it. So these are just some of the things in addition to what I mentioned in my presentation, and I think panelists have been talking about as well. So those flexible arrangements that are in non-traditional ways.
next question is for Maureen. With respect to your POP program, how do the university's EEO officers regard that type of program?
Well, the system-wide, we're working on this throughout the UC system, and there is a group. This is Susan Carlson is involved in this as well. I think she's involved in everything. And this is a governance board that is kind of managing and upgrading. We now use a system-wide recruitment tool for all our recruitments, a software tool. And they are providing now a series of what are acceptable reasons for granting a search waiver. And there is an accommodation for dual career hiring on that list. So we're getting the message that this is acceptable, at least under California labor law. But it's an issue.
This is a question for Diedre. On your slide, you said that part of the role for deans and chairs is to take an active role in career advancement and gender. Do you provide training for those department leaders?
Well, one of the initiatives that our Chief Diversity Officer has implemented, we do now have a search and hiring committee training that's required for all search committees. And one of the things that they do in that training is kind of talk about, of course, questions to ask, not to ask, but also they give them training in ways of evaluating applicants, I guess without being biased, right? Kind of helping them to understand unconscious bias. Another training that's not necessarily required yet, but that was offered through Advance was training for the deans on unconscious bias and how to be, I guess, more aware of concerns with career-life balance and things that are happening within the college. So yes, we have been able to, through Advance and through some support from the Office of the President, to provide training for deans and for chairs that has kind of trickled down to mandatory training for faculty who are serving on search and hiring committees. So we have been able to do that.
So you talked a little bit about people working odd hours and doing distance education, but in my experience and talking with other people, most of those positions, the person is either already tenured when they come in or they're adjunct faculty. And we recently had a position come open, and some of the people who were applying, wanted to know if they could do it distance. And the response was kind of, well, there's this service component that's required if you're entry-level faculty, like certain things you can't change, there's a certain minimum. And how are you going to do your service if you aren't on campus? Because they don't really have the technological infrastructure for us to necessarily easily talk to the other campuses, never mind with someone, halfway across the country. But at the same time, that excludes anybody who can't move from taking those jobs, even though you could do the entire rest of the job online.
That's a really good point, and I think the technology issue is important, especially if we're looking at like tribal colleges. They don't have access to the electricity even to be able to, and this is an issue in Arizona. And the point that you're making is very important about connecting and how do you do your service. And I felt this at NSF. Well, you're not here, so you can't do your service. But there are ways. So one project that was funded through Advance at the Medical University of South Carolina is experimenting with the use of technology. So we were able to get like a waiver from the contract people at NSF to use the funding to purchase equipment to enable men and women, the money would be used for women, to connect through technology. So I didn't include it in the talk, but I put it into the resources because it is somewhat controversial, but to be able to stay connected with what's happening in your lab or to be able to participate in a committee meeting by borrowing an iPad. And I myself have done committee meetings between DC and Arizona by using this kind of jabber technology, and you really do feel around the table. So there are technological advances that, when made available, allow that kind of connectivity, even though you're in very different kinds of places. And again, as a geographer, it reduces the friction of distance. But it's not fully available to everyone, but it's certainly one of those twists that can become more available. And it does also require some culture change.
Yeah, I was going to add that I think underlying all of this is the culture of, if you're not in your office, you're not working, which, you know, that has to change. It will change, but it's a very important component. Do we have one last question, or are we ready for a break? Okay, well, thank you very much to the panelists for this